Something strange happened on a quiet stretch of Catalonia's coast. Whispers started in a small kitchen by the sea. Soon the entire food world was watching, unsure whether to clap or cry. Dinner stopped being food. It became a performance. No one in the culinary world really saw it coming. Two brothers, Ferran and Albert Adrià, built an empire on culinary illusion. They turned one restaurant, El Bulli, into the most dangerous force in modern gastronomy. Their influence spawned dishes now found in the most pretentious Michelin kitchens, such as the iconic liquid olive and smoke-infused marshmallows served on pillows of aroma. Praise came quickly, so did imitation. Restaurants across the globe chased the same formula. So did Michelin. Guides, once rooted in tradition, began rewarding spectacle over substance. Behind the curtain, two brothers pulling the strings. Ferran and Albert hacked the Michelin system designed to reward excellence and focused instead on building a hyper-modernist cooking ideology. Their legacy? A broken culinary landscape obsessed with gimmicks over flavor. Let's peel back the layers of the Adrià empire and what it cost the world of food. If you're tired of food that looks good but tastes like nothing, keep watching. What comes next might change how you see the Michelin star forever.
En el año 90 compramos el Bulli. La historia del Bulli es casualidad y consecuencias. No hay ninguna búsqueda, no hay ninguna estrategia. No hay el mejor cocinero del mundo. Lo importante es el más influyente, porque esto se puede medir.
El Bulli didn't begin with foams and fire. The story began with bulldogs. In 1964, a German doctor named Hans Schilling and his wife Marketa opened a modest seaside grill in Calamontjoy, Catalonia. They named it El Bulli after their beloved French bulldogs. The food was rustic and honest, mostly grilled meats and paella. After Ferran Adrià stepped into the kitchen in 1983, all this would change. He was young, untrained, and working during military leave. But the restaurant's isolation gave him a kind of creative immunity. Here, no rules applied. He quickly rose to head chef. And by the late 1980s, the old Mediterranean menu had vanished. In its place, something strange, something that didn't quite resemble cooking anymore. But to understand what Ferran was building, you have to understand what he was borrowing from. Long before it was a trend, the idea of combining science with food had quietly existed at the fringes of academia. In 1969, Hungarian physicist Nicholas Curti gave a lecture titled The Physicist in the Kitchen, where he famously said, "It is a sad reflection on our civilization that while we can measure the temperature in the atmosphere of Venus, we do not know what goes on inside our soufflés." Alongside French physical chemist Hervé Tisse, Curti would pioneer a new discipline, the scientific study of food transformation. They called it molecular and physical gastronomy. The term was born in a lab and not invented in a kitchen. For decades, it stayed academic. Then Ferran found it. By the early 1990s, Adrià began integrating these principles into his menus, creating edible foams without cream, spherifying liquids into orbs, reversing textures. He described his new style as techno-emotional cuisine. A meal at El Bulli wasn't meant to nourish, but to also disrupt. By 1997, Adrià began publishing El Bulli catalogues, part photo book, part manifesto, detailing every dish served with commentary like a scientific paper. He charted recipes like a lab notebook, treated the kitchen as an extension of the intellect. And the world took notice. In 2002, Restaurant magazine named El Bulli the best restaurant in the world. Over 1 million people would apply each year for just 8,000 seats. Inside, guests receive 30 to 40 courses, beetroot meringues, gorgonzola globes, deconstructed tortilla de patatas in a martini glass. Some tasted brilliant, some barely tasted at all. But that didn't matter, because for Ferran, taste wasn't the point. He once said, "Cooking is a language through which you can express harmony, creativity, happiness, beauty, poetry, complexity, magic, humor, provocation." A seductive philosophy. But one word was conspicuously missing: flavor. Not everyone was enchanted. Renowned Spanish chef Santi Santamaria accused Ferran of relying too heavily on synthetic additives. "We are endangering health with gels and powders we don't even understand." Ferran didn't flinch. What began as a beachside cafe for bulldog lovers had become the holy site of a new culinary religion. El Bulli was no longer just a restaurant. This was the point of no return.
If you're searching for the perfect place to dine, let the stars lead the way. Michelin stars, of course.
Michelin had once been a conservative force in fine dining. Rooted in classic French gastronomy, the guide rewarded consistency, depth of flavor, and technique grounded in centuries of culinary tradition. But El Bulli didn't fit that mold. And yet, Michelin gave it 3 stars. Something shifted. Foam became fashionable. Restaurants that once built reputations on heritage and terroir suddenly pivoted, chasing the Adrià-style theatrics. Pascal Remy, a former Michelin inspector who broke his silence in a controversial memoir, described the shift. After El Bulli, you had to innovate or you were ignored. Innovation, once an asset, became a requirement. Chefs were, in fact, punished for staying grounded. Michelin's anonymous inspections, once revered for consistency and mystery, began to appear erratic. Critics argued the guide had lost touch with its original purpose. Sébastien Demorand, the late French food journalist known for his critique of bistronomy and culinary egotism, didn't hold back. El Bulli made cooking about the chef's ego. Michelin followed that scent like a hound chasing truffle. Soon, the Adrià aesthetic became a cheat code. Across Europe and Asia, newly starred restaurants unveiled 20-course tasting menus full of edible smoke, liquid nitrogen tricks, and unrecognizable ingredients served with tweezers. Entire culinary institutes restructured their training to mirror the molecular gospel. Critics and diners noticed the pattern. Flavor was no longer the metric. Storytelling, conceptual plating, and theatrical reveal became the pillars of success.
Lately, Ferran has been concentrating on sequencing, essentially building a specific cumulative experience through related flavors. You know what was cool? The sound of Ferran next to me, making little noises of pleasure as he tasted his own food.
I love that you're having so much fun at your own restaurant. It's so awesome.
His dream has always been to make sure that everyone will have so much fun as he had.
Ferran Adrià stood at the front of the revolution. But behind the fog of liquid nitrogen stood someone else, less photographed, less quoted, but no less powerful, Albert Adrià. While Ferran orchestrated El Bulli's transformation into a global phenomenon, Albert was quietly engineering the mechanics of that transformation. He joined El Bulli in 1985 as a pastry chef. But he didn't just make desserts. He studied patterns, systems, reactions, the internal logic of flavor, texture, and visual surprise. In an industry that prizes flamboyant egos, Albert was the anomaly, silent, precise, obsessive. In a 2017 New York Times profile, he revealed his true priority. "I never wanted to be in front of the camera. I wanted control." He got it. Albert became the creative director of the Adrià empire. He created templates, frameworks of technique and conceptual structure that chefs could execute across projects. While Ferran was experimenting, Albert was building restaurants, menus, systems of discipline. After El Bulli's closure in 2011, Albert launched a wave of new concepts in Barcelona. Tickets, a whimsical high-concept tapas bar. Hoya Santa, a Mexican fine dining experience. Pacta, a fusion experiment blending Japanese and Peruvian flavors. And spaces like Bodega 1900 and Enigma blended nostalgia and futurism. Insiders began to murmur. Michelin stars seemed to follow Albert wherever he went. Too quickly, too predictably. Many questioned whether the guide was still evaluating experience or merely rewarding the Adrià brand. Behind closed doors, chefs who trained under the brothers spoke of exhaustion. Albert even released his own culinary encyclopedia, a 6-volume set titled El Bulli, 2005 to 2011, cataloguing every technique, concept, and intellectual justification for the food they created. The message was clear. This was the ultimate pretentiousness disguised as cuisine. Ferran drew the map. Albert laid the roads, and Michelin never questioned where those roads led.
This takes us behind the scenes at the recipe lab of the world's best-rated restaurant in Spain. But the food here is a red herring. This is a study of power and shifting hierarchies as the underlings struggle to impress head chef Ferran and Adrià.
Yeah, they do, because this film is all about subtlety, and there really isn't any reaction that he gives his chefs when they present these dishes to him, other than a raise of the eyebrow or maybe a grimace as if to say, why did you even bother picking up the spoon on that one?
Before the Adriàs rewrote fine dining, they rewrote the dish. Not the concept, not the plating, the very form food could take. The spherical olive, arguably El Bulli's most iconic creation, was a molecular bomb dropped on tradition. Created through a process called reverse spherification, the dish transformed olive juice into a delicate membrane-wrapped orb that exploded in the mouth. It looked like an olive, but tasted like an amplified memory of one. They collaborated with chemists like Hervé Tisse and commercial companies like Texturis to refine the edible illusions. Complex names such as sodium alginate, calcium chloride, maltodextrin suddenly were no longer treated as mere additives. Other legendary creations followed, such as Parmesan air, a whisper of flavor that vanished before you could savor it. Melon caviar, tiny spheres mimicking fish roe, but made of sweet fruit. And beetroot sponge cake, cooked in a microwave to aerate and distort texture. Each dish was an optical illusion, a science experiment plated with surgical precision. But what made them revolutionary was how they disrupted memory and expectation. You knew the flavor until it hit your tongue. Chefs and diners alike were forced to unlearn everything they thought they knew about taste, texture, and presentation. Yet behind every illusion was obsession. Each dish often took months, sometimes years, to perfect. Dozens of failed tests, unrelenting precision, and an unbearable culture of silence in the kitchen. Ferran once said, "A creative dish must move, surprise, and amuse the diner." But some wondered, was surprise enough? Was a burst of olive juice really worth the erasure of traditional technique? By the 2010s, Spain's food scene became a full-blown export strategy. At the center stood the Adriàs, culinary figureheads used in national campaigns. Spain's Secretary of Tourism put it plainly, Ferran Adrià has done more for Spain's image than 1,000 ad campaigns. Michelin responded, and generously. In 2002, Spain had 8 three-star restaurants. By 2022, that number had doubled. Barcelona's prominence in the guide surged, so did speculation. The Adrià brothers were right there, helping to reshape the expansion playbook for Michelin.
He's just announced it's closing for 2 years, starting in 2012.
As the years pass, it gets more difficult to create because so much has already been created. So I decided we needed to do something radical.
Ferran Adrià is at the top of his game, but the nagging question he keeps asking himself is, what else can he do with food and his creative energy?
When El Bulli closed its doors in 2011, it didn't fade into culinary history. It reincarnated with a more ambitious purpose. Enter the El Bulli Foundation, a non-profit, or so it claimed. Ferran described the new entity as a think tank for innovation. Its mission: to document, decode, and redefine creativity, not just in food, but across disciplines. But behind the inspirational rhetoric was something more calculated. It was brand preservation. Ferran announced that El Bulli would reopen, not as a restaurant, but as a museum of ideas. The project, named El Bulli 1846, was framed as a creative laboratory located in the very same isolated cove where culinary doctrine had once been born. He told the Financial Times, "We are not a restaurant, we are an idea." The space wouldn't serve guests, it would serve legacy. The foundation received funding from major corporate partners including Telefonica, CaixaBank, and Lavazza. Spain's Ministry of Culture and regional Catalan authorities also contributed. Public-private partnerships helped convert the Adriàs into cultural ambassadors. But some critics weren't convinced. In 2018, The Spectator published a biting assessment. The Adriàs turned food into concept art, and Michelin turned it into propaganda. Despite its non-profit status, the foundation functioned as a PR machine. Press releases were carefully orchestrated, documentaries were produced, exhibits were curated to show El Bulli not as a restaurant that closed, but as an eternal, untouchable movement. Behind the scenes, an entire content platform, Bullipedia, was launched to archive every known technique, dish, ingredient analysis, and creative process tied to the Adrià brand. More than 30 volumes were planned. Some compared it to a culinary Vatican library where knowledge wasn't freely given but guarded. Critics questioned the purpose. Was it education or image laundering? Few chefs could afford to replicate Bullipedia's scale. Fewer still could challenge its influence, while culinary non-profits elsewhere focused on food security, access, and sustainability. The El Bulli Foundation focused on intellectual property, curated exhibitions, and brand control. No meals, no guests, just an idea, paid for by sponsors and protected by legacy.
The restaurant, even with 3 prestigious Michelin stars, loses money. But Adrià's decade as a celebrity chef has spawned a business empire. He's written numerous cookbooks. At his main business office, he discusses a planned book about a century of culinary arts.
While the Adrià brothers stubbornly redefined fine dining and rewired the ecosystem that supported it, Michelin, once a quiet gatekeeper of classic culinary excellence, had become an eager accomplice in the Adrià doctrine. After El Bulli's rise, restaurants worldwide scrambled to catch up. Tasting menus ballooned from 5 to 15, then to 30 courses, each dish a conceptual statement, each meal a test of endurance. Chefs were more concerned with inspectors rather than only cooking for diners. And diners, once paying for pleasure, now paid to be impressed. In chasing stars, many kitchens adopted the El Bulli framework without the resources or talent to support it. The result? Collapse. Restaurants in New York, Paris, Tokyo, and São Paulo closed after spending millions to emulate the Adrià model, only to fall under the weight of debt, burnout, and creative exhaustion. Consistency was impossible. Sustainability a fantasy. One Tokyo chef who lost his star told Nikkei Asia in 2021, "We became performers, and the audience stopped clapping." Meanwhile, young cooks trained in Michelin-starred labs exited the industry altogether, citing trauma, insomnia, and artistic disillusionment. The Guardian's Jay Rayner asked a question that now haunts fine dining. When did chefs stop cooking for people and start cooking for guides? The Adriàs had destroyed gastronomy and made most of the experience sterile. For years, the Adrià empire felt untouchable. Restaurant openings were treated like global premieres. Reservations vanished in seconds. Critics spoke in reverent tones. But every spectacle eventually faces silence. In 2020, COVID-19 shook the restaurant world to its core. Barcelona, once the center of the Adrià orbit, went quiet. Albert's crown jewel, tickets, closed permanently in 2021. So did Pacta, Bodega 1900, Hoya Santa, and others in his culinary constellation. The most ambitious project of all, Enigma, went dark, temporarily. By 2022, it returned with a new face. Albert announced a revised concept, fewer rules, more spontaneity. No longer a tightly choreographed ritual, Enigma became fun dining, a more relaxed, flexible space offering cocktails, snacks, and an à la carte experience. Enigma had to evolve. It was time to loosen the tie. The reopening drew curiosity and skepticism. Had the temple of molecular modernism been humbled or merely rebranded? Albert admitted in a rare moment of reflection, maybe we pushed too far. The closures raised questions about the sustainability of the Adrià model. Even with Michelin stars and global acclaim, the business model proved fragile. propped up by hype, exclusivity, and relentless reinvention. Culinary commentator Lisa Abend, who once chronicled El Bulli's inner workings, noted, "There's a sadness in watching what was once revolution become repetition." Legacy, it turns out, doesn't guarantee relevance.
I'm not afraid of anything. What is needed is pressure. Without pressure, there is no creativity.
Ferran and Albert Adrià were visionaries. No one denies their creativity. Their ideas stretch the limits of what cuisine could be. But vision without restraint breeds delusion. They offered the world magic, but demanded chefs become magicians. In the process, food lost its voice. What was once nourishment became narrative. What once fed communities now fed only Instagram. Maybe it's time to stop chasing stars. Maybe the future of food isn't trapped in a lab. If this story opened your eyes, subscribe for more exposés that unmask the world behind fine dining. And remember, flavor doesn't need a star to shine.